welcome. As Eva said, my name is Dr. Vanessa Spearman McCarthy, and I'm a proud member of the Spelman College class of 2001, as well as the chair of the National Alumni Association of Spelman College Health and Wellness Committee. It is my distinct honor and privilege to present to you this afternoon's webinar, Eggs Over Easy, Black Women and Fertility Fireside Chat. And it features the award-winning executive producer, Chiquita Lockley, Spelman College class of 1997. Our program will be moderated by our own Dr. Dawn Marcelle, Spelman College class of 1989, who is a board-certified pediatrician and public health expert. She is a faithful member of the National Alumni Association of Spelman College, serving at the local, regional, and national levels, and she is an invaluable member of the Health and Wellness Committee. Before we get started, we would like to note that we were going to be discussing some pretty heavy things and some pretty serious things, including infertility, miscarriage, as well as infant loss. And if at any time you feel that you need to take a break for self-care, please do so. It is my pleasure to turn things over to our moderator, Dr. Dawn Marcelle. Enjoy the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. It's a pleasure to be here. And I am extremely honored and thrilled to introduce to you our Spelman sister, Chiquita Lockley. As Vanessa just said, she is a documentarian who produced the successful Eggs Over Easy film. And I'd like to take a minute to introduce her to you. And then, Chiquita, I'm going to ask you to introduce our special guest, Dr. Adams, as well. But Chiquita Lockley is a producer and director of the critically acclaimed documentary, Eggs Over Easy, Black Women and Fertility, which was presented on the OWN Discovery Plus network in January of 2022. She is also the producer of the award-winning documentary, Kunta Kinte Island, Coming Home Without Shackles, which was aired on PBS. She holds a BA in English from Spelman College, class of 1997, and an MA in Film Studies from Emory University. Chiquita specializes in live event production, providing content and creative direction that has appeared on Good Morning America, Amazon Prime, BET, Dove Awards, Stellar Awards, Hank Aaron Chasing the Dream Foundation, the King Center, Human Rights Campaign, Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight, Fox Network, and more. Chiquita has received numerous rewards and recognition for her work in the reproductive health space as a filmmaker, including the Southern Documentary Fund MacArthur Foundation grant. Resolve, the National Infertility Association, which sponsors National Infertility Awareness Week, which is coming up. National Infertility Awareness Week is the third week of April, April 21st through the 27th. And through the month of April, the documentary Eggs Over Easy will be shown on Delta Airlines, along with their choices for film and movies if you're in flight. So if you're in flight on Delta Airlines, be sure to check that out through the month of April. She has also received the Family Building Champion Award from the Cade Foundation. And she's a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and she is the recipient of the sorority's inaugural National Arts Activist Award, which was presented to her at the most recent national the convention in Indianapolis this past summer in July 2023. So congratulations to you, Chiquita, for that. And that award, as I said, was the inaugural award, and it honors the 50th year of the Arts and Letters Commission. And that was just an acknowledgement of how significant the impact of this film has been. She has had the distinction of being named the Goodwill Ambassador for the state of Georgia, and she continues to give back to her community on multiple levels, including mentorship of Spelman Sisters. And she serves as the board chair for the Black Women Film Network, which is the oldest organization for the preservation and preparation of films by, for, and about Black women. Chiquita?
Hello, 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 and thank you so much for having me. It feels good to be home again.
We are so glad to have you. Thank you for being here. The honor is ours.
You want me to introduce our guest, our next guest?
Yes, you can introduce, yes, Dr. Adams, please, and then I'll
All right.
circle back to you and we'll get started. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, happy to do that. So again, thank you so much for having me, for amplifying the work we're doing with Eggs Over Easy Films. When I was in the beginning of my research for the film, there were a handful of doctors I had in my Rolodex I could call for my research. One of those doctors is Chandra Henry Adams. Well, Dr. Adams to most, but Chandra Henry if you are class of 97 at Spelman. And I'd like to introduce her. Chandra has a practice. She's an OBGYN. She has a practice, Full Circle Jacks. It's in Jacksonville, Florida. And one of the key things about her practice, she specializes in high risk or at risk pregnancies, particularly Black women. And she's one of the top physicians for VBAC births. So for women who have had C-sections in the next pregnancy, they want to have a natural delivery, not a C-section. They seek her out from all over the country. They come down to Jacksonville, Florida, so that Chandra can help them have the birth that they want and keep the birth plan that they want. That does not include another surgery. So we are happy to have Dr. Chandra with us today as well.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I appreciate you as well.
Thank you guys for being here. I can't wait to get started. Before getting started, I did want to make a disclaimer and share that while we are discussing health information, this is not meant to be a substitute for medical advice. And if you, as an individual, have any specific or personal questions or concerns that arise in the course of this dialogue, we encourage you to contact your physician or your healthcare provider. The purpose of this webinar is to inform, not alarm, and to continue the dialogue. We started it. It's very important that we continue it and to create a safe space to talk. And so without further ado, as we start, Chiquita, how did this all start? I mean, what was your motivation or your inspiration? How did you birth this project? How did this come to be?
Okay. Well, most things in my life I plan because I'm type A. But this was not planned. This was not on my to-do list at all whatsoever. Once I was 40 years old, I went in for my annual gynecological exam, and my doctor, a Black woman, well educated, great bedside manners. I love my doctor. She looked at my chart and said, "Ms. Lockley, you have a birthday coming up. Your eggs are turning 41. What do you want to do with them?" And I was stunned because I didn't know what she was talking about. Like, do what with them? That was my thought. And because I plan all the things, I plan my work, I plan my vacations, I'm intentional about how I live my life. This was a curveball that it just caught me off guard. I had no idea what she was talking about. So I have the Rolodex of my friends who are doctors. I started calling them. What is she talking about? Do what with my eggs? So that's how the research started. And then I would run into like if you have fibroids, you may have hurdles, and these are the statistics. If you have endometriosis, you may have hurdles, and these are the statistics. So I thought nobody should have to be 41 figuring this out and hearing this for the first time. Nobody should have to be 1 week before they're 41 trying to navigate something you should have known about a decade earlier. And I go back to say that I love my doctor, because it's not a doctor. This is a systemic issue. It's not a one doctor issue. So that's why I try to make a point. The problem of us not having information and not having knowledge, it's across the board. So I said, I'm going to do a 15-minute short film. I'm a producer by trade. That's what I do in real life. So I said I would make a 15-minute short film because I know that if you're doing an independent film, it's about $1,000 per minute, and I could put up 15,000, do this project so that the girls I mentor, like all the young women in my life, my little Spelman sisters, who I'm still either mentoring or close with, they will not have to be here in a decade trying to figure out what is an AMH, anti-malarial hormone, which kind of tells you if your eggs, if you have a reserve or not. Why should they be 41 figuring it out? So I set out to do a 15-minute short, and I would tell one person who would say, oh, you know this person, oh, you know our soror, or you know, I'm close to a lot of women who are Mu Pi chapter, aka at Spelman. So they'll say, oh, you know this person, you know this person. And my number, my Mu Pi number at that same time had posted just a Facebook post that went viral. It went crazy. Don't ask women when they're gonna have a baby because it's none of your business. Um
Mm,
Kamala. So she posted
mhm.
that. And I just thought when I watched it in real time, 200, 500, like the numbers just kept going up on this post.
Oh,
So
wow.
I said, I'm going to do the 15 minutes. And then it started exploding because I knew this person who knew this person, or the bulk of the women were already in my Rolodex. So once I started talking to them, looking at the range of fertility issues that we have that nobody had spoken about, it's not just do you know what to do with your eggs? Do you know when you should freeze them? Do you
Wow.
know your AMH, FSH? Do you know your numbers? It wasn't just that. It was now what happens if there's fibroids? What happens if you are child free by choice and no doctor will tie your tubes or cut your tubes because you're under 40 without kids and now you can't find a physician who can help you? So it was the range of information that I just felt was lacking. And the other part of it was I went to Spelman. This is like the top women. If the conversation is happening, it would be happening amongst us, and it wasn't happening at brunch. And I figured if it wasn't happening with us, it wasn't happening anywhere. So that led to a Kickstarter campaign. We did the Kickstarter campaign, and some of you who are on here know because you sent some coins. Thank you very much. But we did the Kickstarter campaign leading up to homecoming that year. I think this was probably 2016 or 17. So we did a Kickstarter campaign, and it was successful. I just started seeing everybody, all of my friends reposted, if you're coming to homecoming, don't come if you don't give Quita some money. So the week leading into homecoming, we met our goal, and I was able to do the next set of interviews. And that's kind of how it went. Or I would call somebody, another Spelman sister, which remind me if I forget to talk about the impact of just like how we made it based on the backs of Spelman women. But I will call somebody like, hey, I need an investor. And they will answer and send me a check. And that's how I would shoot the next set of interviews, because this topic was one that none of the studios wanted to pick up. We couldn't sell it. We couldn't sell the concept. We couldn't get any investments outside of just our personal network. So, and when I say we, I'm talking about our production team. It was myself, Felicia Fant. I think Felicia's like class of 99, D'Angela Proctor, and Keisha Knight Pulliam. And we were the executive producers who went to work to find all the ways we could to pull this film off. So it definitely rode on the back of Spelman. And at some point, we cobbled together. It ended up being like 5 hours of content instead of the 15 minutes that I had hoped it would be. We end up with
Well,
5 hours of content that we cobbled down into a feature film.
well, you had the digit 5. You knew 5 was somewhere in there, right? It's like 15, 5. There was some degree of consistency. It was a root. And what you said was just so rich, right? I mean, I can go down so many paths and come up with so much information. But one of the first things I want to say is that you pointed out 41, and just this is your personal history, but with the data that is literally textbook consistent and in alignment. As Black women, our average age is 41 when we find out we need IVF if we want a child, because to your point, everyone does not want to be a mother. What your number, a Spelman sister posted. And that is true too. And to make space for that group of women and to let us know that's okay. But 41 is the average age that we find this out, that we learn about how to begin to take control, to wield the power in our personal reproductive journey outside of discussions about contraception and abortion, but truly IVF. And our white counterparts, their average age is 35. That's a whole lot that can happen in that 6-year gap. That is a significantly meaningful and impactful time period that we could be reproducing. And you said we don't know. To your point, it is written, people perish for lack of knowledge. And really, we would perish if we didn't know, and if we didn't have full control and reign of our reproductive rights. Dr. Adams, would you like to speak to that?
Absolutely. So, that average age of 40, when we have high achieving women like Spelman graduates and those who go on for additional degrees, we were all raised with that sort of there's an order in which you do things. And your idea is to finish your education, get your career, possibly get a house, get settled and everything, and then introduce children into the future and into the picture. And we are told, try not to get pregnant. Like we've spent 10, 15 years trying to avoid getting pregnant, and thinking, whoa, I've been really lucky. And then all of a sudden you get to the end and you're like, okay, I'm ready to try, and you realize the reason you haven't been getting pregnant is that you were not able to. And so this is a conversation that I actually like to start at 30 with my patients instead of 40. Because as we start talking about things like freezing eggs, most reproductive endocrinologists will attempt to freeze your own eggs up to the age of 43. And this is not cheap. Like this is not something you just wake up one morning and decide to do. And then IVF on top of that, we're talking up to $30,000 in cost per cycle. And to just hit somebody with that at 40 and say, you have a year and a half to figure that out, that's no small task. So at 30, I start using things like, hey, why don't we put aside about $150 a month? It's a cup of coffee every day. Just put aside a cup of coffee every day. If we meet the person or we're ready to settle down by 35, then we have our little stash. And if everything goes well with fertility, we can spend that on making the dress or the honeymoon or the house more fabulous. But if not, then we have, a fertility nest egg, not to, no pun intended, but we have a little nest egg stocked away that we can start looking at some fertility assistance.
And to that point, from the financial aspect, how does private and public insurance fit into this?
Quita, I'll let you speak to that because just recently we discovered some amazing resources together. Go ahead.
We can tag team it. So for the most part, most states are not required most states don't require companies to have fertility coverage. And what that looks like, most people, I try to compare it. You're familiar with the pregnancy rider. If you work anywhere from Burger King to Coca-Cola, if you get pregnant, you can go to your HR and ask for a pregnancy rider with your insurance. You pay a little bit extra, have your baby, and it's covered. That does not happen with infertility. So what happens mostly, and what the only thing that most states require, is that they do like diagnostics. So they can find out, you could take tests to find out the problem. Like if your tubes are blocked, they will take you and pay for it. Your insurance coverage goes up to your tubes being blocked. They find that out. Now what? If you need to have IVF, it doesn't, there's no additional coverage. Most companies don't have riders. Some states like the state of New York, they do require some coverage, so they have a little bit more flexibility. If you work for a tech company, because they're many times California based, it is required. So that's a great place to go. Like if you work for Starbucks, even if you are the person that's the cashier, 3 months in, you have this coverage. So there are some companies, but by large, there aren't any. We just found out, and thanks to Chandra, I was unaware of Kindbody. Kindbody, if you work for Walmart or Tesla, they have a Kindbody rider. So you can go to Kindbody doctors and it's covered. You can get Kindbody. Some of the states don't have a Kindbody facility, so they pay to send you to one. They'll pay your travel to go to one. So now there are a few more options. On one of the resources that I try to make available to everybody is Eggs Over Easy, our Instagram page. So if you go to Instagram, Eggs Over Easy Film, you got to put film on it or it'll take you to like frittatas and ways to make eggs. But put the film on it. Go to Eggs Over Easy Film, and in the highlights, that's the little circles up top, we have one that's like money and funding. Click that, and then I keep track with all of the grants that are available. We just were able to give out a free IVF like a week ago, from one of the companies at CNY Fertility in New York. Like, hey, it's Black History Month. Would you like to give out IVF? Yes, of course we would like to give out IVF. Say less. So we put those there. I'm an advisor for Cade Foundation. Cade Foundation was started by Dr. Camille Hammond. She and her husband, who's a Morehouse alumnus, had infertility problems. Her mom ends up carrying the triplets for them. And I'm happy to say one of the triplets is a freshman at Spelman, a documentary major, and one of her sons is at Morehouse, a freshman at Morehouse, and then the second son is a freshman at Howard. But they have a nonprofit that gives out it in blocks of 10,000, but like millions of dollars to people who need help because insurance coverage is lacking for most people. So there are some options. If you're egg freezing, there are only 2 places that'll help you with your like paying for the medications, because egg freezing and IVF, that's expensive. The medication for egg freezing and IVF matches the cost of egg freezing and IVF. So there are 2 places that I know of who will help with that, companies that'll help with that. And that's all in the highlight reel on Eggs Over Easy Film at Instagram. So those are some ways that I know, and Dr. Chandra might know a few more.
Thank you. I think actually you did name all of the ones that I usually route people to. I send people to your page. I send them to your Instagram to look for resources for it. Because yes, this, you think about children being expensive anyway. So, after they get here, you're going to spend a lot of money, and a lot of these families just don't realize going into it how much they're going to have to invest. And that's just saying that it works the first cycle. So then you have patients who are going through multiple cycles, and you can get into 6 figures very quickly trying to overcome some of these fertility challenges.
And first of all, thank you both for your responses. That was incredible. And what it called to mind for me was another part of the disparity that we see in races, because a lot of times we just simply don't have the money, not the money on hand. And when it's presented to us at 40 to fund this out of pocket, even those of us who may have private insurance or public insurance, it's not covered. And so that adds to the disparity that we see. And while we are talking about cost and money, how did you fund this, Chiquita? How did you do this?
Through the grace of God. Yes and no. So a lot of it was just prayer and faith, because I definitely and always feel that if something is it's driving you, I would dream about it, wake up about it. I could be anywhere and someone would randomly mention this topic. I believe if God gives you something to do, an assignment, that he helps you figure out how to pay for it. So the specifics of how we figured out how to pay for it, first it was me and my money, and then it was the Kickstarter campaign, and then it was investors after that, or in addition to that. I leaned on Spelman. So for some places, like locations where we needed to film, I will call one of my sisters who had a location, like a building. One of them, like our opening, a couple of the opening scenes, that was shot in a hair salon, because Amika King Carter owns a hair salon that was really pretty. And I could use a brick wall, and that's all I needed was a brick wall. So that wasn't a monetary gift, but it saved me thousands of dollars. It took thousands off of our budget. And then I talk about the edit all the time. Editing costs can cost, editing on a feature film could have been $100,000, and that's not an inflated price. One of our Spelman sisters, her name is Shauna Bain Smith. Shauna has a husband who went to Morehouse, Hudson Smith. Hud, he's a huge Emmy nominated multiple times editor. I could not afford him, but I could put in a call to somebody who knew somebody who happened to be Shauna's biological sister, also a Spelman sister, who could put me in touch with Shauna Bain. And Shauna Bain said, "Don't worry about it. Hudson's got you." And what that meant was not all, but I got on the flight. I went to LA. I sat there, and this man and his beautiful wife, my Spelman sister, figured it out. Like, I just had content. Like, this is the order I wanted in. Good luck, sir. and they put it together. Like, he did an excellent job. So the base of the film, which, remember I said I had like 5 hours that needed to be cut down, and I had an outline of how I wanted it in my head. And he was able to do that. And on just because of our Spell House connection, he did it in a way that I could afford it and said, pay me when you can. So when I did have money from Kickstarter, I sent him like a love offering, which I don't call Hudson asking for the Spell House discount, because that doesn't exist if you're working on your own project. But they did that for me. So in looking at the full budget, my film is a $500,000 film. The cash amount that I had to pay was about half of that, because every time I needed something, I would call somebody. The place that when we shot in New York and I needed to stay somewhere, I called a Spelman sister's mom who had an apartment and it wasn't being Airbnb'd out. Can I stay here? And they gave me a key to go stay there. So the intangibles of how this happened are beyond. When we talk about selling the project, D'Angela, who I met, I knew of D'Angela because she's in TV, Spelman alum. I'm also in the same field. So
D'Angela Proctor, correct?
Yeah,
Our
D'Angela
Spelman
Proctor.
sister, D'Angela Proctor.
Yes.
Class of
So I
91.
knew of her, but I hadn't met her. I met her one time. She
Mhm.
said, "What do you need? Send me an email." I sent her an email, and let me say, people say that all the time. At that point, people have been telling me that for 5 years. Whatever you need, send me an email. And they probably had great intentions, but it never went anywhere. Like, intentions do not lead you to a happy ending all the time. So there were lots of intentions. I sent her email just like, okay, I'll do my part. Whatever happens with it happens. Next thing I know, she said, I'm sending this to the president of the Oprah Winfrey Network. And she sent it lots of places, but that happened to be one of the places. We already had someone who had started the actual process at OWN for us. So it was making its way up the chain. When it got to the woman who had to say yes or no, she said, the president has already called and told me to expect this film because someone named D'Angela told her to take the film. So the next thing was just doing a contract. And now all of that sounds easy. I'm skipping a lot of steps, but that was how it happened. When we got caught up in legal, kind of going back and forth, like, is this working? What's happening? The other side of legal was also a Spelman sister who happened to be there, who knew somebody to kind of make it a little bit easier for us. So we didn't cut corners, but we did have some grace there, because Spelman is literally in almost any room you're going to go into. We're there. You just have to figure out how to connect the dots. And that's part, in my opinion, that's part of the beauty of the Spelman sisterhood. I did not know a lot of the women who helped us, but once we said Spelman, that was that. When we went in for our last edit, I was very concerned. I didn't want them to gut the film. So part of the deal was that the network would get final edits. And I was very nervous about that. They sent me the 2 names of the people who would be editing. I Googled both of them. One of the people who could say yes or no, keep this, don't keep this, was a Spelman sister several years behind me. I sent her a note on Instagram like, hey, just want to let you know, I see you, thank you, whatever. When they sent it back, they had only shaved like 3 minutes off, and I needed something put back, and she put it back, and it was no issues. I am telling you, when I say the grace of God in the backs of some women, that's literally how this film happened. And I am so grateful.
You know what? Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, that really feels like a Spelman testimony. And really, this is just such a perfect setting in which to share that, with the power of our network, and just taking a moment to hear how organic that was and how small. But listening to you, it didn't all sound simple, and it sounded like a lot, but we can do a lot, right? And we literally are everywhere. And this film has been very well received, very highly regarded, critically acclaimed. My question to you right now is, would you share some of the impact that you have experienced, and has it done what you'd like it to do thus far, and what do you see beyond now?
The film has done more than I expected. Maybe I had low expectations, but I just wanted, my goal or my intention was to touch the girls I mentored. That was how I started. And
Oh,
anybody else who could be blessed and have information, great, all the better. That wasn't I didn't set out for that. That just kind of happened. So now when people send me, like this week, I got a postcard with a baby. It's a baby's picture, because that woman was like, she saw the documentary. She said she would DM me all the time. She's like, I saw the documentary. I think I should go to the doctor. And that might have been 3 years ago. Oh, there was a problem. So she'll update me. Oh, this is the new surgery. Oh, this is what I had to do. And last week I got a picture of the baby. And that was just one of the many, many times I was out of the country. A woman asked, like, what do you do? I told her, I was like, oh, I have a film. And she burst into tears when I said the name of the film. I thought she was being dramatic. You know, people, you never know. But her husband walked in while she was crying, and she said she did the film. She did the film. And he automatically knew what she was talking about. So she was
oh
not being
wow.
dramatic. That was something that they were literally walking through in that moment. And that was like on soil somewhere else. So I get all of these testimonials all the time. And so it makes me feel good, like all the hard work, although that wasn't necessarily my intended goal. I'm happy to see that people are watching it and they are taking action, because a lot of times we don't ask our doctors questions because we don't have the language to ask them. We don't know what we should ask them. To Chandra's point, you just think you escaped getting pregnant because you weren't using protection, and oh hallelujah, but actually that was infertility. And if nobody is saying, okay, if you're under 35, is what, a year of unprotected sex is infertility. If you're over 35, is 6 months is infertility if you're sexually active without protection. And if you've gone to 3 years with no oops, you should probably go to the doctor. But we don't know that. So I think what the film has done is give women some more knowledge that we didn't have, because I didn't know. I had no idea about those numbers. And it also gives them the language to ask the questions. So that has been a beautiful outcome of the film. Where I think we're going, or where I want to go, so we need to do a 10-city tour. We've planned it. We're going to go to HBCUs. We're just in the middle of trying to find funding for it. And the reason is we have to take the film to the students and to the community, and not just expect them to, like, they're watching the Housewives. No shade to the Housewives. They're watching whatever popular thing is on TV. They are not looking for this, but this is the thing that saves their lives. So we have to take it to them. And that's the next frontier for Eggs Over Easy. And of course, we're on Delta, which you mentioned. So Delta Airlines, we're excited about that too.
So just
As
to
you
add
should
to
be.
that, just adding to what you're saying there, because as someone on the front lines, my patients they're looking for social media, and they're looking for what's out there that they can watch, what's relatable for them. They come in for their appointments. We have 20 minutes, and you're thinking about the thing that's most pressing to you, or you're kind of roped into whatever your physician or your provider's agenda is. Have you done your mammogram? Did you do your colonoscopy? You're doing your self breast exam. Like we have our tick, 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 tick box. But if you're having painful cycles, if you're having heaviness or pressure, like that may not come up. Sometimes that, I have to pull that out of a conversation. By the way, do you have to take pain medicine when you have cycles? Oh my gosh, yes, but it doesn't work. I'm doubled over on the floor in pain. And oh, you aren't going to mention that. That's not normal. Well, I thought it was normal because that's how it's always been. Every woman in my family has been like that. And so then we start searching for what the diagnosis is. And, we still are contending with some of that old medical racism of white women have endometriosis, Black women have pelvic inflammatory disease. And so, instead of actually trying to look for a new diagnosis for us, or just saying, oh, you have fibroids, and fibroids answers everything. And so we're not going to do anything about your fibroids, but just know that everything else probably has to do with your fibroids. And one day you go in to do the fibroids and you say, oh my gosh, there's endometriosis everywhere. And also, have you been trying to get pregnant? Because you probably can't, because your tubes are all wrapped up in this endometriosis. And so there are just so
You know,
many different aspects that this film has introduced that people are now coming forward and saying, wait, that could happen to me too. So that's been another effect of the documentary.
and to your point, Dr. Chandra, about we have PID, right? And they have endometriosis. I have a story for that, but later. the one thing I wanted to say that you pointed out that I wanted to bring up was also physician bias regarding pain in general when it comes to us. When we say we hurt, we are not believed. We are simply not believed. And there is objective data, medical research that demonstrates that. I think most recently at UVA, Virginia College of Medicine, that when medical students were surveyed about pain, there is still very much today, I'm not talking about Jim Crow era, there is very much today, here and now, that when we say we're hurt, we're not heard. And even when we're heard, we're not listened to. You know, that is huge. And so when it comes to physician awareness, I'd love to hear more about what you do and what you recommend. I think medical education, specifically in residency and fellowship, needs to have, in the area of OBGYN, maternal fetal medicine, high-risk pregnancies, we need to become, as a discipline, as a profession, more attuned and check ourselves, more introspective and reflective, and look at what we're doing as well as what we're not doing. You know, a part of the reason historically we have been infertile, we were in perfect health. We were just fine. But a Mississippi appendectomy was performed without consent. And who knew? Because who said? You know, Fannie Lou Hamer is known for speaking out about that because it happened to her. It happened to her. So if you could please share what a Mississippi appendectomy is and things that you do and what you would recommend and just guided questions that you would have people in general speak to their physicians about, because as Chiquita said, we don't know the language. We think these abnormalities are normal because for us they are. You know, they're, you know, metrorrhagia, menorrhagia, even middle smear. What are these things? And, you know, if I didn't know, I wouldn't know.
Right. And I mean, so visuals are so important. Representation in who your providers are, and that's not just your physician, but in the hospital, nurses looking like us, very important as well. Speaking to Black women not being listened to with regard to pain, I track my stats. You know, sometimes you miss a delivery because that baby is just determined to get there before you can make it to the hospital. It happens. But I tracked my numbers and went back and looked to see whose deliveries was my practice missing. And 80% of the deliveries that we missed when I took this to administration were African American women. And I went back and I talked to those women and I said, what happened before we missed your delivery? And they walked me through. I told her I was hurting. I told her I was hurting. She told me it was too early. I wasn't hurting yet. Did she evaluate you? Did she check you? Did she call your provider? No, she just told me to drink some water or to get up and go to the bathroom or something. And I took this to administration and I said, hey, these numbers say something because my practice is 20% African American, but I missed 80% of the deliveries that I missed were of African American women. And we took, I mean, socioeconomic status actually didn't even play into this because these are women with private insurance. Some of them were actually nurses. And exactly. And so when I took it to them, it was, oh, this is a very sensitive subject. Let us get back to you. They did not get back to me, but what I began to see were more faces of color on the unit because at that time there was no diversity in the nursing staff there. And so then I began to see them hopefully intentionally hiring more people who look like their patient population. And we began to see changes in what happened with our patients being listened to when they complained of when they were in pain. And then to your other question regarding what some of these abnormalities are in terms of visuals being important. When I show people what 80 milliliters of blood looks like, this is what a pad should look like, and this is what too much blood on a pad is. what do your pads look like? When I show them how little 80 milliliters is, I say, if you're bleeding more than 80 milliliters a month, that's too much blood. And I show them what that looks like. And they say, oh, I hit that on my first day. I'm like, but is that it? Is that it for the whole? No, do it again the second day and the third day and the fourth day. Then let's check a blood count, because there's no way your body is keeping up with this. But if you just say, is it heavy? Her answer is going to be, no, it's not heavy. It's what it's always been. You have a sister, and endometriosis has a genetic component. Fibroids have a genetic component. If everybody in your family has heavy, painful periods, you think heavy, painful periods are normal. And so you have to just take it out of, is it okay? Because that's a very quick, easy way for us to just check a box. She always said her periods were okay. Do you know what okay is? And then you can tell me if it's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you. And for those who may not know, a Mississippi appendectomy is when a woman, really a Black woman, underwent a hysterectomy unbeknownst to her. There was a time, and I'm going to say was, but this is not the distant past. There was a time where people like us were under anesthesia, pre-consent. Informed consent was one of the silver linings, I would say, I suppose, that came out of the Tuskegee experiment. But prior to that, when we underwent surgery, we were intentionally manipulated surgically, unbeknownst to us. And so we weren't infertile, we were sterile, because we were sterilized surgically unbeknownst to us. And that was a practice in American medicine, in American Western medicine. Certainly here in Louisiana, and for the namesake, Mississippi, it's called the Mississippi appendectomy. That's how frequently it was later found out that I don't even have a word for it. That was done to us. I don't even have a word for it.
Genocide. The word you're looking for is genocide. Sterilization.
Heinous.
Yes,
heinous.
it is.
It is unbelievable and known and acknowledged and agreed upon. These were in surgical suites and surgical rooms with witnesses, and everybody was okay with it. And yes, genocide.
And it wasn't even that long
us,
ago. It wasn't so long ago.
No.
There was a documentary
No,
about it within the past 5 years that won all award seasons, probably 2021, where in prisons in this decade, the same thing was still happening. And so there was a documentary about all the women who thought that they were going in for something minor and ended up, it was a sterilization surgery within this decade. And it just swept, and that was primarily Black and brown women. Although the documentary was done by a white woman, the incarcerated women were Black and brown, and they would come out of these small surgeries, are like, you're supposed to get a something to help prevent you from contraceptive. That's what they think they're going in for, and they will come out and not have ovaries.
Yeah, and to the point made, I would if I could, but I can't. To the point in the chat, and to call it an appendectomy denotes a sense of urgency to it. Medical criticalness, surgical urgency. And so thank you for putting that in the chat. We did see that. We do want to have some time for a Q&A towards the end, but one of the things I wanted to bring up was just talking about it, and just to say I'm just so grateful that you were able to join us and we are able to have this dialogue in this space. It feels so important and so necessary, especially now in the context of so many things. There is what we just mentioned, and most recently, like i.e. Tuesday? In Alabama, it was decided that IVF is no longer criminal. But when the Alabama Supreme Court, made a decision against IVF and it was abortion and criminal, and doctors and families, parents were liable, UAB, which is a state school in Alabama, had a lot to say about it. And literally in 2 weeks, legislation was on Governor Kay Ivey's desk to undo that. And that is the power and the impact of eggs. One of the things you say, Chiquita, is my eggs, my business. And what's been happening right now, politically and legislatively, makes me really think of that. Would you like to expound on that? I mean, and look, your intro already did give information about it. But at the same time, in the context outside of the film, outside of your personal experience, would you like to speak to that, and how has that been received?
Well, I'll speak briefly to it. I don't know if you could see my cup, but it says mind your
I can
own.
now.
I thought it was appropriate for today. And I won't jump into it because I know this is not a reproductive justice panel, but there are people who are minding the business of our uterus. Is it uteri, Chandra? Two, more than one. There are people who are in our business and they are not this isn't their conversation. So the majority of folks who are congressmen, our representatives, our senators, who get to make these decisions do not have the body parts that would make them even know what they're talking about. And that is how we get to Alabama. That is how we get to Texas, a woman who needs to have an abortion to terminate her pregnancy because it's not viable, and they tell her no, she has to hop states to get to it. That is how we get a woman, I forget which state she was in, the Black woman within the past 2 months, who miscarries into her toilet, which is traumatizing given that she'd gone to the hospital for 3 times. By the point of her miscarriage, she'd already gone to the hospital 3 times, and they kept sending her home, and then finally she just went home because there was no help for her and no instructions on what to do if you feel yourself miscarrying. And that woman was up for a felony. She had to go to court and relive the trauma of what happened to her every day because a nurse, I don't know what happened to HIPAA laws, but a nurse decided to call the cops and say, that this has happened. This is what the patient said. So now there's this whole system of, does she have to now have a double penalty from having a miscarriage and not properly disposing of the fetal tissue when nobody gave her instructions anyway? Thankfully, they didn't find her guilty. But the people who made decisions that she was even ever in that predicament are men, and men are the ones who continue to make these outrageous decisions for our lives. And I'm trying to be quick, but I'm under 50. Most of my friends, we will turn 50 this year or next year. We've never lived in a world without Roe v. Wade. So this is shocking to the system, just to know that if for some reason I needed to end a pregnancy, I might go to prison for ending the pregnancy, or I might have to carry a fetus with no brain or no organs, in a pregnancy that should be terminated. I'm forced to carry full term, because that is what's happening with women in many states in this country now, because of the 6-week heart bill, or the no provisions at all whatsoever for when a birthing person needs to terminate a pregnancy. And that is because someone who should not be in our uterus is there making decisions for us. And having lived in a world where this wasn't an issue, it is very shocking. I sit in on panels all the time. I sit in with Planned Parenthood. Actually, 6 months before all of this happened, the president of Planned Parenthood was on the panel telling us that this was about to happen, and the implications for IVF, because there's no national guideline about it. Every state can make their own rules up. So when we look at Alabama, yes, Governor Ivey went in and signed a bill, and we have how many more states that could do how many governors are going to sign it? She's a woman, so yes, she signed it. What would happen in Georgia with Kemp? Another shout out to Stacey Abrams. But what would happen? What would happen in Georgia if that bill were to be there, when we already know there's the 6-week ban? So All that to say, people in power who are making these decisions from a headspace, they are not physicians. They do not know what they're doing, and they are not equipped to, physically not equipped to make this decision or any of the decisions on our behalf. So they should
And
mind their own.
thank you for that. And Dr. Chandra, I'm going to ask you to speak to that as well. But first, I wanted to just quickly interject that for those who may not know, while I assume most of us do know, HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And in that, patients should have privacy. I mean, it is illegal, and a physician, a nurse, a healthcare provider literally breaks the law by exposing someone's medical experience, their medical diagnosis in the course of their care or treatment. So that's what was being spoken of or referenced in the context of how did that even get there? How did that even get out in that case? And also the state of Mississippi with our with those appendectomies, it was Dobbs, right? In the state of Mississippi, it was Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization that ended up in the reversal of Roe versus Wade. And so it's really so important that who we're talking to and where we are. And to reiterate your point about going into the community, being into the community, it is important for us to have these dialogues. But at some point, we can't just have them with ourselves. And hopefully this will empower us to be able to have the foundation and the network to take it to the next level, to go beyond where we are right now. I'm Dr. Chandra.
Yes. So I'm in Florida, and Florida is Floridaing like it's never Florida before, right? And we're at a point where politics is going for shock value, and I whether or not the candidates believe in what they're trying to pass, they're just trying to become more and more extreme in order to appeal to a more and more extreme voter base. And it's the loudmouths, I call them, and whether or not they actually represent any sort of a majority, what is happening is that it appears that they are enough to influence the people who are making these decisions. And so they make more and more extreme decisions, like what we saw happen in Alabama. I mean, practicing over 20 years, as Chiquita just said, I wouldn't have imagined we could ever be here. And then for Alabama to say IVF isn't, I mean, no one knows more than a fertility couple. No one knows more than an IVF couple that an embryo is not a child. Like, they cannot bring an embryo home and put it in the crib and raise it and send it off to nursery and school and college. That's not a child. And to make that same, to equate it, and then some of the, well, where does it end suppositions that they said, well, um, you might implant it from someplace else and put it into, I mean, these things just aren't even, this is science fiction. Like, you didn't consult anybody. Like, even Grey's Anatomy had to have a physician on staff to consult so they didn't sound ridiculous when they aired the show. But you can write a whole law without talking to one single doctor about it. I mean, that seems ridiculous. So, I mean, just like, Chiquita said, stay out of the uterus, but also stay out of the physician exam room. Like, these are personal, private conversations that people are having with their physicians, and they are making very difficult decisions. When someone gets the horrible, gut-wrenching news that their baby is not going to survive, these are lethal anomalies. There's no brain, there's no spine, there's no heart, or there is a heart, but it's not going to make it outside of you. And then they make the decision that they cannot emotionally continue that pregnancy. That wasn't a fly-by-night, spur of the moment decision for them to make. And then to make it, well, you can't do it here in Florida because now you're 16 weeks. And if only we had known this when you were 15 weeks. Now you just need to go until either the baby dies inside of you, or until you're full term, and then you risk all the things that happen with a full term delivery of a baby with anomalies getting stuck, possibly damaging you, and the psychological trauma of the team that has to be in that room to deliver this baby with all of these anomalies. Just like you said, Cleta, none of their business. And when it actually happens to patients, I've had patients who were on the side of under no circumstances, absolutely not, no one ever, until it happened to them. And you can believe that these same people who are making these same rules, if something happens to them and their family, there will be a backdoor situation going on.
Absolutely, Dr. Chandra.
Because they can
And
afford to send their family member to New York. And when we look at these numbers and the disparities,
correct.
as brown and black people mostly affected, we're making 61, well, it fluctuates 57 to 62, but I think 61 cents on the dollar of a white man. So we're already not making a full dollars worth for our work. So economically, that's part of the disparity for black and brown folk. So if we're in that situation, the likelihood of being able to get flued out to California to have the procedure that you need to save your life and or sanity is slim. But for folks who are in the chairs making these decisions, they can fly to Europe, they can fly to New York and take care of it. And that is problematic, top tier problems.
And absolutely appreciate the comment just made in the chat about the irony of pro-life, or some of the arguments of pro-life, and when we'll protect life in the womb, or how we define life in the womb, and then not so much, right? Once that child is born. And Dr. Chandra, I tell you, from a public health perspective, I would call it the antics in Florida, but it's not even funny. But as you said, Florida is really Florida-ing right now. I mean, and even from the measles outbreak, I cannot help but think, we test MMR. That R is rubella, and you can have congenital rubella syndrome, but nobody needs or wants to get measles while pregnant or in a newborn. I mean, there are reasons that we wait, right, until you're 12 months and 15 months to vaccinate with that particular vaccine. I mean, this it just is nonstop. So even the state of Florida, I won't call him your Surgeon General, but the Surgeon General or the health physician, top doc in Florida, even his view and his words and his medical and public health recommendations to the people of Florida, which is what, the fourth most populous state in the country,
Yes. Are dangerous. Dangerous.
Yeah, and they directly impact birth and
yes.
health and safe pregnancies. Absolutely. Yes. Shout out to Shauna Bain Smith. I'm sorry, I got caught up in the chat, but I just wanted to say that as well. And before we go to questions, one of the things I wanted to say, Quita, is what you said, and a part of why this is so important. Fertility. We don't talk about it. We won't talk about it. And so we suffer in silence. We suffer for years. We suffer alone. We suffer. And I just think that's so real. And that's a part of why settings like this do matter. But it's also important why you need to get to your 10 cities, right? And beyond. It's why we have to have each other and the network that we have to come together here so that we can go out and do what we do, because we really are everywhere and in other arenas. And you do not have to be a board certified practicing physician to be an advocate, to be knowledgeable, to share a story, to share information, to share facts, to share data, to help somebody, and to help save or create or protect a life. Any comments before we open up for questions? Okay. Well, Vanessa, Dr. Spearman, would you like to take questions from the audience for our panelists, for our sisters?
Yeah. Yes. If you have questions, please type them in the chat, or you might we might be able to see if you raise your hand. But if you have questions, please feel free to ask them now.
While the questions are coming up, you made mention of the importance of dialogue and discussion. And Quita also introduced me not too long ago to another organization. I guess it has been a while now, but Fertility for Colored Girls, which is a national organization. I think it started in Detroit. And now there are multiple chapters all over the country. And it's basically a safe space and community for Black women who are having issues with fertility. And I know I mention this organization probably once a week to some of my patients who are going through this, because again, there's always that stigma that, oh, Black women are too fertile, and so there's no conversation of whether or not there is a fertility issue, and they feel alone, they feel isolated, they feel like no one else is going through this because every other Black woman is fertile. And of course, if you're going through something, you feel like you're going to thank you for putting that in the chat. I appreciate
Hey, Tracy.
the link to that. But you feel like you're the only person going through it, because you're going to baby showers, you're going to all these other things every other day. And as I talk to them, the mother-in-law is saying, when am I going to have grandkids? Y'all moved into this big house, and not even thinking that there may be a problem, you know. And so I tell them, hey, you just probably need to create a community and space to normalize what you're going through, so you don't feel so much isolation. And I mean, this March is National Endometriosis Awareness Month, and the organization that supports the FFCG chapter here in Jacksonville, and my practice is the sponsor. All three of the physicians, full-time physicians in my practice, are Black women. We just had an event today actually talking about endometriosis and how it takes 7 to 12 years for people to receive the diagnosis because of being turned away and being told so many different things along the way. I see some questions coming up, so I'll stop now. Go ahead.
Well, I have one thing to say before we go into questions. I'll make it quick. Most of us mentor Spelman students who are graduating or who are still at school. One of the things that I think is very important to share with them, outside of them asking all the questions to their doctors, is Felicia Fant said, prepare for your fertility like you prepare for your career. And what that means is, when they're getting these job offers and they're weighing the options, they need to make sure they're asking about the insurance and fertility riders, especially for egg freezing, because that could mean one company is giving you soft costs of 6 figures, because it could be $100,000 or more if you need egg freezing or IVF, versus the other company that does not accommodate this. So when you're looking at numbers, this offers you $100,000 for a salary, this offers you $100,000 for a salary, but they offer the infertility rider, that makes it $100,000 for this and $200,000 for this, because we're walking away leaving money on the table because we don't know to ask that question as we're getting jobs. So that's very important, especially if you're mentoring some of our students.
Thank you for that. And one of the things, Dr. Chandra, I wanted to say, okay, and then Jennifer, be sure we want to answer Jennifer's question. Dr. Chandra, one of the things when you said, believe the people who are making these decisions to restrict access or to limit or restrict access or criminalize, if they are in need, they will do it. And one of the things I learned a long time ago in practice is that a diagnosis or a medical situation can have a 0.0000009% of happening. But when it's you, it's 100. It's 100 every time when it's you. And so we always have to remember to empathize, and these numbers are people, treat people as people. And when it's you, it is 100. And so, 2 questions. Dr. Vanessa?
Okay, we have several questions, and if we missed it, please shout us out, because it's not intentional. But I think the first question I see is, um, this is for Chiquita. We're moving into Oscar night. So what are the next steps for your film? And there's another
Hey,
part to it, but I'll let you start
Adrian.
there. Mhm.
The next steps, that's the 10 city tour that we are working to pull together. If you are at a company that still has DEI funds, we know DEI has been gutted in so many ways. But if you are at a company, this funding will come from your HR, because normally it's HR is who is paying for this sort of thing at companies, unless it's a reproductive health company. Please give us a call, because we need partners to help us pull off the tour. So that is the next step. And of course, if you are flying to Friendly Skies with Delta Airlines, tune in. They're counting our numbers. So don't just take a picture to say we saw it on the picture on the screen. I need you to press play and then take the picture and send it to us. But definitely press play. That will be helpful in terms of our account.
And to follow up with that same question, are there additional dialogues to continue the education of regarding fertility? So I guess, maybe a part two, or, different, I guess, other aspects to your 10 city tour that may not be covered by the first film. And this is from Adrian Lance Lucas, class of 1990, who is bi-coastal, Atlanta and Los Angeles.
Who I also happen to love and adore. No, there will not be a part two. Part one was so hard to pull off. And even now, with the success of the film, streamers and networks still are not interested enough in the topic to pay for a part two. So that is why there has not been a part two. Do we have more stories to tell? Yes. Some other people have picked up the ball. I know of 3 or 4 of the documentaries also struggling with funding, but they're making their way forward. So there will be additional content on this topic, just not eggs over easy part 2, and that is only because of funding.
This comes from Jennifer. From a creative perspective, how did you know you completed the film? What did you feel when you saw the final product?
I did not know we completed the film, because it can go on, and even we had so many cuts. Like, I screened this film in 2019 before COVID, so 2019 at Essence Fest, and I thought that was the end, but it wasn't the end, because COVID would come, shut down everything. Keisha Knight Pulliam, who was the narrator and the EP before, was in the middle of her IVF process, and COVID shut down everything. So that, of course, meant our story was extended, because now we had to follow story to see what happened with her situation, and now she has a little boy, and he's so cute. So the story ended. I just had to say stop, because it would never have ended. So at one point we just said stop, sent it into the network. They shaved off a little bit, and that's what we got.
Our next question, I think this might be for Dr. Chandra. What are some other signs that Black women should look out um, for with respect to medical racism in the fertility sector? For example, the example about endometriosis versus pelvic inflammatory disease. And then any recommendations on how we can advocate for ourselves without generating backlash from our medical team.
It
Maybe
looks
Michelle
like
as
Sandra
well.
just went off.
Yes. So, Shaquita, if you
But you
have
know
any
what?
thoughts,
I can speak to that too a little bit. Can you restate the question, please, Vanessa?
sure. So, what are some other signs that Black women should look out for with respect to medical racism in the fertility sector? For example, endometriosis versus pelvic inflammatory disease. And what are some recommendations on how we can advocate for ourselves without generating backlash from our medical team? Or I'll just speak plainly, for not seeming like you're the angry Black woman. How can you walk that line of being an advocate without getting the backlash?
Well, I think a part of it, speaking up for yourself, advocating for yourself, is knowing your body and feeling that you have a rapport with your physician and that you can speak to them. A part of it is is having trust and in the privacy and their respect for you, as well as their scope of knowledge and their fund of knowledge. You know, one of the things that you may see or that you can look for is if in your discussion, being sure that you are offered all of the same options for treatment and care. And while you may not know what those medical options are, you should trust your provider to know. And sometimes you can just say, well, are there any other options? Is there anything else I might consider? If you need a referral to an obstetric subspecialist, being sure that they are working with you to ensure that that referral is made, that someone in their office, if not them personally, can look at your insurance to see what the options are for you to get the care you need. And, you know, I understand the question about without the backlash, especially not wanting to come off as the angry Black woman, because many times when we walk in the room, before we even open our mouths, it can be assumed of us, you know, but it's just speaking your point, knowing what that is and knowing your why, and just literally talking to your doctor. I think one of the things that helps me to receive as a physician, as well as to speak when I'm a patient, is to think about what matters to me beforehand and then write it down. You know, just have a bullet point, you know, and I know a visit can't take beyond a certain amount of time on either end, but being sure that you feel as a patient you are getting the care and attention you need, and if there is a time constraint for whatever reason in your actual visit, being sure that before you leave that there is a way you can finish. You can, you know, different doctors have different methods of communication and how they can follow up with patients. It may be them, it may be the nurse, it may be a follow-up appointment. Some may do email, but just knowing what that system is for your physician. And if you don't feel comfortable, you're not supposed to necessarily know what your physician knows, because we went to med school for that. And Google MD did not last time I checked. I don't know what's out there. But if you see something, you have done your due diligence and you have questions that are important to you, because every question that matters to you matters to me as your physician. You need to ask and feel that you are getting the follow-up that you need, even if it doesn't happen in there, and persist. If it's important to you, do not let it be brushed aside. And if you feel like you are getting pushed back or clapped back because you have asked a question or made a comment about your health, you have the wrong provider.
Ooh, yeah.
That's not the person for you.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I had a little technical issue there for a moment, but I did hear the question. But I always say that it goes a long way to acknowledge your feelings, like to humanize your questions and your plight. Like, you're not a medical case, so you're a person who has feelings about your health. So when you come in, you know, instead of starting out with, you better tell me and you better not hide, you know, this is a topic that means a lot to me. It's very emotional for me. And sometimes I might raise my voice, I might start to cry, I might start to shake. But that is because this means so much to me. And I just need you to ride with me through to the end, until I get to the end of my questions, and understand that what I'm saying is not personal about you, it is personal about me. And, you know, if a patient comes in to me and that's the floor, then I understand. I mean, I also, like, again, my patients come to me because I get it, because when I go places, they're like, I'm trying not to be the angry Black woman. So if you come to my office, we don't think you're the angry Black woman, because all of us have been called angry before. But I mean, again, that's where representation matters. But if you don't have, you know, access to providers who look like you, there are allies out there too. And so, you know when you feel comfortable someplace, and just trust your intuition. And if what you're getting isn't what you need, don't try to beat that square peg into that round hole. Just thank you for your time. Take care now. Am I able to to transfer my records. Like, do I just sign the release on my way out and find somebody else, because you're not going to make that person become a better doctor to you.
I think I get to that place much quicker. I'm not a physician, and my health is my own priority. I don't have the patience to wait and hope that the doctor listens. So I always have my questions. I ask them, if you think I'm an angry Black woman, like, I'm to the point. I'm not angry, but I am to the point. And if it doesn't go well and I'm 15 minutes in and I know the doctors only have 10 minutes, I will know immediately if I need to switch doctors. And through trial and error, I have a good panel of doctors, but sometimes something comes up and you need a doctor that's not your regular doctor. I do that. And then I go to their I Google to see their bedside manners and reviews. Reviews matter. Take them with a grain of salt, but they do matter. And then I go to their Instagram. If you are a doctor who does not look like me and your Instagram doesn't have anybody on it who looks like me, you're probably not the doctor for me, no matter how great the reviews were that you wrote, like articles for somebody. You may not be for me. And so I don't second guess myself. I will second guess the doctor before I second guess myself. But that's how I, as a patient with no medical background, that's how I determine who it is. And if they think I'm angry, that's not my issue. I want to be healthy. I want to have a long life, and I want to advocate for myself. So these are my 3 questions. And if we can't get them situated, I will have to have another doctor. To Dr. Chandra's point, can my records transfer? So I think that always is just don't feel like you are glued to that one person. Unless you're in a really small town and you don't have access, because I'm from a small town. So if you're in a really small town and you don't have access to anyone in a small town like Jessup, Georgia, you can go to, your neighboring counties. But don't ever think that this is your only option where your health is concerned. You have to be your own advocate.
Absolutely. And I'd like to add to the conversation. I agree with everything my sister said. And I'd just like to add that don't forget that you have a network of people, whether it's with the women within your own family, women within your church, women, if you happen to be a Spelman College alumna, which the majority of our audience is, talk about it. I know sometimes we get so disillusioned and scared and we don't share, but so many people have been through what you've been through, maybe not the exact thing, but they have resources to connect you. And then don't be afraid to bring somebody with you. You can bring another person. So if you're not the person who can speak when you're anxious and scared and upset, which that's understandable, bring your best friend, bring your mom, bring your espouse somebody to help speak and get the word out for you. That can be very helpful. But in leveraging your network, it could be really helpful as well, because I had a family member that was not being heard at their doctor. So I'm not an obstetrician gynecologist, but you know what? I went to the American, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting, College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and I pulled the exact guidelines for the issue that she was dealing with, email them over, and the conversation was a little bit different because this was somebody who was not arguing from feelings, they were arguing from facts, because this is your governing body. So don't be afraid to reach out to other people in your network that can do that for you.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to use this platform. I don't know how to raise my hand, but I was just going to say that, add to the conversation by saying as well, know your tribes. So, whether it's AKA, whether it's my Spelman sisters, I'm fortunate where I go into that network first, and there's not one alumna that is not connected medically, professionally, attorney, anything. Since we're talking about medical, the doctor I'm seeing now is Spelman alum. All my doctors are Spelman alum. So I'm blessed that way with that network.
Are there any more questions?
Tina has her hand raised. Go ahead, come off mute.
I'm actually trying to defer to Dr. Fleta Mask Jackson.
Dr. Fleta?
I was trying, I'm like someone else. I wasn't quite sure how to get my message across, but I will say this. Um, you know, the stress of gender racism that we experience in all aspects does impact us in terms of infertility, in terms of what our pregnancies are, in terms of our pregnancy outcomes, in terms of postpartum. And the thing that we have going for us to mitigate that is our Spelman network. And if there was anything that I heard on this call, that was crystal clear that we do have that network, social support. Anybody here who's on in public health or medicine knows that that is a mitigator for dealing with the stresses that affect our bodies because of the psychosocial stressors that we encounter because of being Black women. Now, on this whole issue about infertility is an interesting one as I'm kind of doing something a little longer in the book length kind of project now. And I'm not sure whether how long we've had this issue, this disparity in terms of infertility, because I'm not sure whether some of the aunties and other people who never had children, if in fact that was their issue, and it was never discussed, it was never anything that came forth. So what you're talking about now, and I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you because what you have brought to the forefront is to let us know that this is something we can talk about, that there are things in which we can do to address it. But I'm not sure how long it goes back. Because that's what has really got in my mind all the aunties and other women who I would think they'd never had children. And of course we loved them because they loved the other children. But maybe they wanted to have their own children and whatever the medical advancements were at the time were not made available to them. So again, gendered racism in the medical practice, but also the things that we bring as we care and take care of everybody else and are afraid for our children, all of the things uh, have uh, uh, have jobs. I'll share this with my Spelman sisters. One time at reunion, I was talking to. I'm a golden girl now, but this was somebody who was a golden girl many years ago. And and we started talking. I said, "What did you do? Well, how did you make a living?" And she said, "I was a teacher." I said, "You say you was a teacher?" She said, "Honey, I had to get out of that because I like to starve to death." She said, "We did not make the money. We did not have the income, so I couldn't stay there." So this economic disparity is real in terms of what that means having to have two jobs. I wonder, for instance, if Atlanta, which is a city that many of you know has the greatest disparities in terms of income. Now, that disparity in income is not just among women who are poor, but it's among well-educated women as well. Well, how does that march into our stress? So I'm just really proud of this conversation and to have been part of it. So that's what I would say. Let's take what has been said here as steps for action. We have a built-in network that other people don't necessarily have. We made good choices where we went. What can I say? We made a good choice. I ain't bragging. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. And I can tell you that it works for a lifetime. As a 50-year
Thank
graduate,
you.
I can tell you that it works for a lifetime.
Thank you so much, and especially for pointing out that this is not yes, we have disparities. We've just been tracking the disparities the last maybe 2 decades. But when you look, I had back when I was researching, pulled logs of property, enslaved women viewed as property. And if you look at the prices, if you were childbearing, someone who could bear children, and you had a track record of being able, you were sold for a higher price. And then women who could not bear children, they were sold for a lower price unless they were cooks. Then they would have a higher price, because that also meant that they couldn't breastfeed all the owners their babies.
Sure.
So this probably is not new, but we've not been tracking it from 400 years ago. We've only recently been tracking it. But if you were to look at the prices that Black women were sold for, and it'll have notations by it, that was some of the notations that I found. So I'm certain that this is not new information, just tracked more recently. To your point, yes. Thank you.
Yes, yes, thank you, Chiquita. Thank you, and I'm very, very proud. And you just make me so excited to know to underscore the Spelman Network. That's what's really just really steps out. We're here and we're here for each other.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Mask. Thank you.
Vanessa, do you want to have any other closing thoughts before we try to wrap up?
I just want to thank everyone on our panel for taking the time to speak to our network. We're indebted to you. We're proud of you. And, you know, there's so much that we can do when we do it together. And on that note, I will turn it over to our national president, Kiva Wright-Berry, for our final remarks.
Thank you, everyone, for this. This has been awesome, and I don't say that word lightly. We've got excellent attendance. We've had wonderful conversation, and I think it's become a place for us to have someone's talking about a difficult conversation. I'm glad we could have this. I want to thank our panelists, of course, but I also want to thank Dawn, because she brought this idea, Chiquita, to bring you here to us. So I'm glad she did this, and we've had this conversation. I'm sure it will continue, and perhaps going into next year. This is the last session for our Health and Wellness Committee for this program year, but I know that going into next year, they'll start having some more, and we'll keep everybody informed. Just want to bring a few announcements to everybody's attention. We have some other things going on with NAASC. On March 23rd, we've got our corresponding secretary working session for NAASC members only. But prior to that, starting on Monday, those of you who were members should be receiving your ballots for elections. Elections will run between March 11th and March 18th. Next on our agenda is on some things that I'm going to. Houston chapter is having their Game Changer signature event on April 13th. Every chapter appears to be having some Founders Day events, of course. So we'll be getting those out to you so you can make sure that if you're in the area of someone having a Founders Day event, you can have one. Another great one that I'll be going to is on April 20th, a Founders Day wreath ceremony to be held in Athol, Massachusetts, at the burial sites of Sophia Packard and Harriet Giles. If you're in the New England area, or just want to come and see where our founders and get the sense of where they trekked to come and found the great institution that we love and call Spelman, please join us then. Keep track of us on Facebook. And then our big event. Anyone who's been listening to me for the past few weeks has heard me mention the True Blue Sister Summit, June 19th through 23rd in Charlotte, North Carolina. You must come. If you think this session was good, come and hear some of the 16 sessions we have scheduled for the True Blue Sister Summit. It will be a phenomenal event. I look forward to seeing everyone there. And then finally, I just want to say, when Sister Chiquita talked about the connections that she made to get her project taken care of, and they were through Spelman Women. When we say, call us, email us, I said this to people in Chicago, we mean it. Call us, tell our young sisters, call us, contact us. We want to help, because that is what we do as Spelman Women. Thank you again, everybody, for attending. Have a great rest of your evening, and keep in touch with us as much as you can. Check us out at naasc.org for additional information. Thank you all, and good night.